questions, and today we're dealing with the fact that prophetic voices are needed now. And the fact that today we have in our city the presence of a legendary, iconic, relevant, resourceful leader who is ready to lead the charge, speaking truth to power and mobilizing people into collaborative action. His name is the Reverend Al Sharpton. Let's receive and celebrate his presence. Come on, let's celebrate him here today in Houston, Texas, and in Harris County. Absolutely.
Run, Al, run.
Run, Al, run. Absolutely. And fly, Al, fly, which is what he does so much, moving around the nation. We are blessed to have him in our city. And when I learned on yesterday from him upon his call that he was coming to Houston, he said, can we just get together Saturday evening, spend some time? He was thinking about a quiet dinner, a one-on-one conversation, some R&R, just to kind of chill, think, and talk. And I said, okay, good. And after he said yes to that, I called him back. 2 minutes later, I said, I got a better idea. And he immediately said yes. So this is time that he would be resting, but he's continuing to work. Would you give him another hand for that? That means a whole lot on a Saturday evening. Reverend Sharpton, founder of the National Action Network, and a man who needs no introduction anywhere in our country and most of our world. If you don't know Al Sharpton, you must live in a very deep hole that's very dark. 400 years ago, next year, African Americans have been in this country. And persons like yourself, historians and intellectuals like Dr. Cornel West and others talk much about the journey that African Americans and other ethnic minorities have had in our nation, battling oppression and coming out of slavery into Jim Crow, and then into Reconstruction, and then segregation, and up until, of course, we know in the 60s, the Civil Rights Movement at its height brought about some change. And here we are in an America that is still divided. We're dealing with massive over-incarceration, failing public education, immigration issues with babies at the border in cages, and so many different fronts. On so many different fronts, we're facing societal issues. Sex human trafficking is a $190 billion industry, and so many things that we're facing and we're confronted by. You've been on the battlefield a long time, and so I want to ask you if you would give us an opening statement about what you see, and after you've done that, we're going to move to talking about bail, criminal justice reform with Senator Commissioner Rodney Ellis, and deal with other issues. Thank you for being here. Give us your thoughts about now.
Thank you. First, let me say that I'm always happy to be with my friend, Bishop James Dixon. And people need to know that Dixon and I go back about 20, 25 years, way before people would welcome me to certain parts of Texas. I started National Action Network 27 years ago, and Dixon was our first Southwest director when they dragged James Byrd Jr. in Jasper. It was Dixon that brought me down, and we were just laughing about it in the study, how I got up and announced donation to the family from Don King and hadn't even talked to Don King. We did give him to give it. That's before he was a Republican, though. But we go way back. And Dixon was in New York not long ago, and we talked. So I thought about it. I came in last night to do Bishop Hilliard's men's breakfast this morning. I'm going to preach tomorrow for Terry Anderson and do my television show from here in the morning. And I said, I'm going to call Dixon and chill out Saturday night since I got 3 or 4 things I have to do. And he called me back like he said, well, you go chill out, talk to score about leadership. And I said, well, that's fine. Because one of the reasons that I think we need to do this is that our leadership and activists are impassioned, but in many ways uninformed about other issues. Everybody has their pet issue, but we need to know across the board, because the way we broaden our information is how we can broaden our coalition. And I think that no one that I've known around the country, I've been in this since I was 12 years old, and been ever since then. I was 12 years old. I was the youth director at 13 of Dr. King's chapter in New York. And I don't know anyone in all that time that has synthesized it better than Commissioner Rodney Ellis, who understood and still understands how you translate all of the noise into public policy and legislation. So we saw a season of noise, but now what happens? It's interesting to me that when President Obama was in, everybody was in the streets. Trump come in, and we don't see the same street action. I said to a lot of young activists in National Action Network, well, Red, we need to do this, we need to do this. We was out front Ferguson, out front Trayvon. None of that we're seeing now. So a lot of it is not that they were not committed, is that I think they understood instinctively that Trump is not going to tolerate what Obama did. When Michael Brown's grandfather called me while he was still laying on the ground in Ferguson and got me to come out there, and I said, all right, it was a Saturday. I said, I'll be there Monday. On that night, they started rioting, and Sunday night, then I got there Monday, and they had the tanks coming out, and many of you saw it on TV. I called Washington, and Obama and Eric Holder backed the tanks up. Well, Trump would tell them send more in. So I'm saying that to say that we're in a period where you have to be strategic, because right now, if there's an uprising, that's exactly what Trump wants. And if you had that kind of action in Texas, it would reelect Cruz. Even though I know we're having a nonpartisan meeting, this is me talking, this ain't Jim, it ain't the church. And I think that is why when he told me we're going to talk about certain areas, we need to be fired up just as much about sex trafficking and public education and immigration than we are about our issue, because as long as they can have us in tribal politics, where we only are concerned about our tribe and not concerned about the entire village, we will never, ever be able to continue the course. Now, let me say this quickly, and then we can go into the format, because I want to hear. I remember when I ran for president in 2004, Sylvia asked me the hardest question I was asked, and she was just telling me she was surprised I could answer it, because I believe in homework. That's why I'm telling y'all, she'd make a great congresswoman. I didn't, because you need content, not just noise. If you study American history, Bishop said 400 years next year is when we were first brought here enslaved. What a lot of people don't know, it started in Europe when Pope Nicholas said Africans were less than human, and slavery became sanctioned. And it went on by the Pope and went on, and finally slave trade. So it's always been a kind of blessing of those that supposed to have moral authority on immoral behavior. But there's always those in those circles, like a Dixon, that would stand up and be prophetic than profitable. There's a difference. There are some that are in the clergy or in the ministry to make profit, and there are others that are there to be being a prophet. And that's always been since biblical days. when the United States was divided between the Confederacy and the Union, and the abolitionist movement had started by whites and Quakers and some of those in the church that were white, and started raising the question of it was immoral. That Lincoln never was converted. Lincoln came to the conclusion, after losing several battles, that they could not save the Union without signing in blacks to the Union Army. And in key battles, blacks defeated the Confederates. Once they did that, Frederick Douglass and others had convinced him, then give us our freedom and give us our equal rights. And that is where, as they continue those battles, Lincoln begrudgingly started growing. And I give him credit, he grew. A lot of us don't grow. He grew and started seeing it as the right thing to do, but it started as the strategic thing to do. Because organizing is based on self-interest. It was in his self-interest to save the Union. Then it became him becoming greater to say, yes, people ought not be enslaved. Watch night service. The reason why you have watch night service different in the black community than other communities, watch night was not about waiting on a new year and we was going to, shout hallelujah or go get drunk or do both. Some of us shout hallelujah and then go get drunk. But that's another forum. But it was about Lincoln had promised January 1st, 1863, that we would be free. And watch night was to stay up all night to see if Lincoln would keep his promise. That's right. And he did. It started then a period of Reconstruction. And it went all the way to an amendment. We got the right to vote. We became full citizens. And inside of a decade, we had 22 members of Congress and the Senate black. Senate in South Carolina, black. It then caused a backlash. History shows you 2 steps forward, 1 back. And the Klan was founded, White Citizens Council founded, and they began to terrorize on the ground. What really caused the problem was not the black sheets on the ground, the white sheets on the ground, it was the black robes. Supreme Court came and undid all of the equal protections that we got under Reconstruction and under Emancipation Proclamation. So they start with terror, come back and legalize it. So I say that it's the same thing happened in the Civil Rights Movement. Brown versus Board of Education, 54. Next year, Rosa Parks does the sit-in in the front of the sit-down in front of the bus in Montgomery, led to the fight around the Civil Rights Act. It took 9 years to 64. People think that the boycott was the end. The boycott just changed a state regulation in Alabama. It took 9 years to get the Civil Rights Act, but they never stopped freedom riders. Young activists calling Dr. King old. I mean, all these tensions we hear now are not new, but they won. It led to 68, old King's too moderate. Black power advocates fighting King, this, that, and the other. And in the middle of the uproar, backlash. Who wins in 68? King gets killed in April. Everybody fighting on who's going to be the new leader, whether it's nonviolent or violent, whether it's self-defense or whatever. Nixon wins. Backlash. Everything goes back. Leads into Carter, because Nixon got caught with Watergate. Carter only did 4 years. Reagan come in, and the conservatives reigned for over 2 decades. What we are in right now is after 8 years of Barack Obama. First time they saw a black in the White House. You had people that were legitimately raised to believe that whites were superior. And no matter how poor you were better than blacks, you were better than Latinos, you were better than anybody other than white. All of that turned on their head when their kids started saying, the president, their kids got to look at a black face hanging on the wall in school. Their kids said, I want to be like Malaya and Obama's kids. The kids seeing this, and it caused this tremendous backlash feeling. Babies growing up saying, I want white babies, white girls growing up, I want to be like Beyonce. This was a cultural freak out for how a lot of them raised their kids. So it built to a backlash, and that is the spirit of what brought Trump in. Any of us that study history would understand there was going to be a backlash. Now, we thought they'd get a better example than Trump, but they never was looking at Trump. And the reason why you know they lost their minds in this backlash fervor is when you see evangelicals who think everything is a sin, and they would give immunity to this man who does everything openly that they preached against. You know it is not about what they thought was sinful and about him. It's about backlash. And he's doing what they did when I started talking about Reconstruction. You see the neo-Nazis marching again. Charlottesville, he making them a moral equivalent to the people that are there saying they should not keep a statue of a symbol of treason. Don't forget Robert E. Lee. The only reason he's in history is he fought to overthrow the U.S. government. Stonewall Jackson, these guys were not in office. These guys formed another government to overthrow this government. So why would you have statues that this government is going to pay sanitation people, public parks people, all kind of people, police to protect statues of people to try to overthrow the government? It would be unheard of in any other country. But he made that a moral equivalent. And the most dangerous thing is he starts stacking the courts. He has put in several hundred federal judges. Kavanaugh at the top and Gorsuch are just the tip of the iceberg. These are federal judges with lifetime appointments that will change immigration laws, voting laws, civil rights laws, sex trafficking laws, criminal justice, and undo everything that we got done from the civil rights movement to Obama. Obama, whatever we may have wanted more, but they did start. Obama commuted more sentences of low-level nonviolent drug offenders than the last 11 presidents put together. Obama came with a Criminal Justice Act. Obama did Affordable Care and came with other policies. Now, I tell my more leftist progressive friends that if Obama didn't do nothing, then what is Trump undoing? You can't undo nothing. So where we are, as we meet today on September 8th, is we're in the midst of a backlash to the 8 years of Obama, preceded by a movement that had turned this country toward, not there yet, toward what was better in many of these areas. So it is good to hear people that are in those areas break those areas down, because this is the message that we've got to go out in the midterms and beyond and be committed to, and know that this is not anything new. It's just manifest differently. That's why when Obama spoke yesterday in Illinois, he said it's not about Trump. Trump is a symptom. He's right. Trump is a symptom, and we get Trump out, Pence is worse. So we've got to be policy driven, and we've got to turn our noise into something that is organized music that can continue where we need to go. And that's why I think tonight's important.
Wow. Can you imagine what we would have not had we not come together this afternoon for this most important and timely dialogue, punctual dialogue? Criminal justice is one of the issues talked about across this country. Mass incarceration plagues black and brown communities and poor whites everywhere in our nation. In the last 20 years, prison population has more than quadrupled. The three strikes you're out policies and other drug policies of the 80s and 90s produce mass and over-incarceration. We are becoming an incarceration nation, and it needs to be talked about, of course, that the United States has more people in prison than any other developed country on the planet. And we keep trying to solve problems by locking people up. You mentioned the Commissioner Rodney Ellis. has been working diligently in a very methodical, strategic way to get us to understand what that's all about. He's been working on reforms dealing with the death penalty, and he'll talk about that. But now his passion has been leading us to dealing with bail reform. Harris County has a system that is money-based as opposed to moral-based. And so if you have money, you get out. You don't have money, you stay in. I want him to talk about Harris County and why it's important, why this is such a passion of yours, Commissioner Ellis. And we've got Judge Darrell Jordan here. You'll introduce him. But talk about what's happening in Harris County. We know a federal judge has ruled it unconstitutional, but this county has filed a lawsuit to fight to continue this unjust system.
Bishop, first
let's thank and welcome Commissioner Rodney Ellis.
Thank you. Bishop, first I want to thank you for your leadership. You know, I always think of Bill Lawson and, you know, what an asset he's been to our community. One of the few people that turned down Martin Luther King when they asked him to go national. He chose to stay here. And you're very much in that legacy, Bishop. You know, sometimes I joke about coming over here that time I slipped in the back of your church in my little spandex. And so I was in the back. I was bike riding, decided I'd stop by because, you know, y'all think I don't go to church. And so I was in the back and you were giving this sermon. And it was heartfelt. You said, sometimes I wonder why the pews are not filled. And then you said, you know, I'm not running an entertainment ministry. And if I was, the pews, every pew would be filled. But every issue that comes up, when they had these baby jails, Congresswoman, Senator, I mean, it was important for some voice in the African-American community to speak out on that, and you did it. And on any issue that comes up, we out there fighting on, you know, Douglas trying to keep folks from putting a statue up of the owner of the Texans out there in front of the stadium. I wonder, are they nuts? You know, no, nothing out there, Earl Campbell, nothing of my predecessor, nothing of Mickey Leland, nothing of Thurgood Marshall, Barbara Jordan. You're going to go put the owner up. They got the best deal for a stadium owner in the country out there and needed somebody. You were there, whatever it is. So I salute you. Give him a round of applause. I appreciate you. You've done a great job. Yeah, give him some love. Give him some love. That's my pastor. It's my pastor. I told my wife I want you to speak at my funeral, but I ain't going nowhere yet. Reverend Al Sharpton, thank you. You know, you talk about a great mind. I mean, a gift that God gave you and you use in terms of intellectualizing these issues in a snapshot in ways that we can understand them. I didn't know him as well, but I was not on the scene when he was there as a kid, but we were around one another. We were back there reminiscing till they had to pull us out going through stories about them big Negro meetings around the country that led to Jesse Jackson run for president. I was Mickey's chief of staff, so 81, 82. And so he was there. You know, he didn't remember me because I was about 250 pounds. And, of course, I remembered him, but he got that weight off. He's looking good. But clearly one of the greatest minds and orators in the history of this country. Thank you, Reverend Sharp. Here's the issue real succinctly. There are 10 of us up here. Here's how it works right now all around this country. The 10 of us have the same profile. Somebody had a little trace of marijuana in our car when we were in high school, and we got stopped. We were lucky we got off. All 10 of us arrested. Same profile. 7 of us stay in jail because we can't post bail. The 3 who have money get out. They got the same profile. Why would the 3 who had money be less of a risk to not show up than the other 7 who didn't have money, so they stayed in jail? If you get stuck in jail, I haven't spent any time in jail. The worst one you want to be in is a county jail. Yes, sir. That is the worst, least to do. If you got to go to jail, ask them to hurry up and get you out and go on to the state jail. in Texas. If you're really lucky, you better get to your federal jail. If you're a prayerful person, go to Club Fed. But if you're a poor, young black male, and you get arrested in Harris County on a Friday night, that's the worst time to get arrested. And don't let it be the Labor Day weekend, because nobody's going back to work till Tuesday. You stuck in there. And that's just not right. Douglas and them are going to honor me at the NAACP, and I hope y'all take me up on it. Y'all need to honor this young man who filed this lawsuit. You know, in fact, don't give me, if y'all can't do both, save me. I ain't going nowhere. I'll be around. This young kid, Alec Katakris, with his group, they got a grant from Harvard Law School for $250,000 to go out and do good. So he took the same theory Thurgood Marshall had. Constitutional argument, equal protection. It violates the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution to keep 7 of us, all 10 got the same profile, keep 7 of us in jail, let the other 3 out because they have money. That's the same argument to integrate the schools. If the Founding Fathers didn't mean it when they said you get equal protection under the law in this country, if they didn't mean it, they shouldn't have said it. And they damn sure shouldn't have written it in the United States Constitution. That was Thurgood Marshall's argument to integrate the schools. It's so simple. With all our education, why didn't somebody think of it earlier? They took the grant and they suing little bitty counties, Alabama, Mississippi. Harvard-educated lawyers team up with some local firm or get a national firm behind them, and they whipping it. They doing it. Senator, they whipping it. Then they decide they're going to pick them a liberal county in Texas, Travis County. That's when they got on my radar. So they heard about me. I chaired the board, as you all know, the Innocence Project out of New York for 14 years. I'm no longer chair, but I'd take every exoneration and look for a policy issue and pass some pretty good stuff in a red state, Texas. This case was just so bad it would shame them. They say, let's give this fool a vote just so he'll stop calling press conferences. And we passing stuff in Texas. This kid comes, young Alec Katakris, gets in my office. And I said, man, tell me what you're doing. And he said, this is what I'm doing. We got Alabama. I said, well, that's real nice, but that's a little bitty county in Alabama. I got this, yeah, okay. I said, if you want to bring light to dark places, you go where the lights are off. Not where they dim. Go where they're off. You need to go look at my county. I'm in the state senate, Senator. I said, you better go look at Harris County. They did this study. Stanford Law Review did a deal on it, documenting all of this stuff. Go down there and look at it and talk to them, and that's what you get after. If you want to go something, go after the big enchilada. You get after it in Texas. They sued Harris County. All around this country. I was on the phone with the public defender in Philadelphia the other day. They meet with the NFL Players Association Sunday. I asked the public defender, how are you getting all these athletes? Well, I mean, what is going on? How did y'all do all this in Philadelphia? She said, we read Judge Lee Rosenthal's opinion from Harris County, Commissioner. Listen to what I'm saying. All around this country, bail reform, you go ask them what's making them do it. Cook County, bigger than us right now, Chicago. Judge who was in the race to be mayor of Chicago, can't think of his name, Al, right now, he ruled they ended money bail based on not having the ability to pay for misdemeanors in Cook County because of the ruling out of Harris County. So what's this county doing? I'm going to wrap up on this. We spent $8 million fighting a temporary order. Fifth Circuit, 2 panels, Judge Jordan, have ruled that it violates the Equal Protection Clause. And it also violates the Due Process Clause. Now we're fighting over the remedy. This young man's been the hero. He's a judge, municipal judge, Judge Darrell Jordan, all over the opinion. And he brought along one of his Republican judges with him. One Democrat, one Republican, saying this is ridiculous. You can't do it. But we're fighting it in this county. Look, Rem Sharpton talk about, you know, why aren't people out there marching? How could we do this, spend $8 million of your money fighting it? End it on this so you get it, in case you're not a criminal lawyer. I've been to divorce court before. It's common if you go into divorce court, somebody going to get put out of the house. You gonna get divorced? Well, you know, somebody got to get out of the house. And then you decide, the judge temporarily says, well, Rodney, you got to get out. And then I'm gonna go spend $8 million trying to get back in my house. At some point, the children ought to say, Daddy, I think y'all need to get a divorce. Think about it. $8 million fighting a restrainer. Why are they doing it? They banking on the history of the Fifth Circuit, known as the most racist anti-federal circuit in the history of America. They waited until the Justice Department changed the amicus in favor of ending money bail, the Obama administration of justice. So this new crew changed it. So don't let that happen. You need to fight, and timing is important. With that, I want to briefly let Judge Jordan break it down any simpler than you can. And I know I got Stacey Abrams' fundraiser going on, but we'll get out of here.
Oh, you go.
It's on. It's on.
Thank you. Man, I just got a microphone from the Reverend. That's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. Well, this is the way I see it. I used to lay in bed. I have a history major, and wonder what would I have done if I had been alive during the civil rights movement. You know, would I have risked my body, risked my life for the cause? And it was just something I could only think about because, of course, times have changed. Then I became a judge. And when I took the stand, okay, the plaintiffs were on one side, and then I'm a defendant on the other side with all the judges who are being sued. I went and testified for the plaintiffs and told all the dirt that we were doing as judges, how we would use bond as a way to punish people. You're 2 minutes late to court, triple his bond, lock him up. Wow. Whatever it is, we could just do whatever we want because we were judges. And I didn't recognize at the time that that was a big deal. I grew up in this small town, Albany, Georgia. At one time, it was the murder capital when I was in junior high school. And so those are the type of things I dealt with. And people would come up to me and say, it takes courage what you're doing. And I would go back to the hood rules. I'm like, well, they can't whoop me. I mean, so what's the big deal? I'm going to tell it. And if you go back and you read the opinion, I'm all through the opinion because I told all the secrets. And I didn't know if that was going to be a positive thing or a bad thing. Wow. But I realized this was my opportunity to march on the front lines. And so what's the worst case scenario for me? I'm unelected and I go back to my regular life of being a defense attorney. And so it was just really, to me, because Commissioner Ellis has already broke it down, it's a story of courage and how we are all enabled with the power to make change if you're willing to make that sacrifice. You know, that new Colin Kaepernick commercial by Nike is just so moving to me, because what are we willing to sacrifice? A lot of people are politicians for economic gain and this gain and that gain, but what about the other people? And so I don't really have much to say about Bill Reform because you broke it down, but I will tell you that this fight is happening right here in our backyard, and our politicians who we've elected are choosing to continue this fight. The judge has already said, hey, you guys are going to lose. You're going to lose when we go to trial on December 3rd. But they're still spending millions and millions of your tax dollars fighting a losing battle. Some of them are Democrats, and the majority of them are Republicans who are continuing this fight. So it's the power of voting, because if I had not been on the bench, if I had not been elected, then who knows what would have happened. And this case will reverberate across the United States. So it's power of voting, and when you're in office, do what's right. That's it. If you run on it, you talk about it, do it. Don't be afraid to lose your job. I was completely blessed, grew up homeless, all kind of stuff. So I'm living the dream every single day. So there's nothing anybody can, the Bible says, you know, learn to be content, been rich, been poor, be content, recognize that God's gonna take care of you regardless. Believe the stuff that you hear on Sundays and go out and practice throughout the rest of the week. And that's the end of my statement.
Thank you. Pass that over. Let me say, Judge, thank you for your courage. And we appreciate that. Reverend Sharpton, when you hear this, this is a national epidemic, as we've heard. And you talked about the fact that we don't mobilize like we did in previous administrations. Would it seem that because the people who are spending the taxpayers' dollars are elected officials, and of course they normally run on campaign issues that deal with being fiscally conservative, but to spend $8 million of taxpayers' money fighting against a Republican judge's ruling seems almost oxymoronic. Wouldn't it seem that churches, organizations within our community, what if we signed a petition to get thousands and tens of thousands of voters to say to Harris County, end the fight, settle, let's rid Harris County of the money bail system? What type of action should we be taking? What's your thoughts about that?
I think that the action should be exactly that. Not only petitions, but rallying in each of the churches. Because first of all, when you hear the judge and you hear the commissioner talking about this, we are talking about members in your church. And the children of members in your church. And why are we building churches if we're not going to serve the people? And I think that what we need to do is petition them and register voters around that issue. A lot of young folks say, I'm not voting because it don't change them. If they understood that judges are elected or appointed by elected officials, and that's why their cousin got bail and somebody else went home, then they would understand they're not voting for who is the cutest or got charisma. They're voting on their interests. We need the church community, the faith community, to make it a moral issue and rally on behalf of the people that are the ones that financed and built the churches in the first place.
We've got great pastors here, and I know they're taking notes on this. They're part of the Kingdom Builders Global Fellowship, so I know they're activists in their own right for the most part as well. But that's an action item that we can take, so we don't just have conversation. Right. We have action agendas, an action agenda tied to all of our issues. Understand, and the commissioner normally uses this illustration. I'll borrow it from you. If one man or one person is arrested accused of murder, and the bail is set at $1 million, then he needs $100,000 to bond out. If he has money, he's out. Another person steals something, yes, at Walmart, or is accused of stealing something at Walmart, and the bail is set at $5,000, he or she needs only $500. If they don't have $500 cash, they stay in jail. So you've got one person accused of murder and one accused of shoplifting. The accused murderer is out, preparing to defend himself or herself. And we've actually had such a case that he talks about. That person, $500 loses their job, they can't go to work, their children are displaced, they may end up in foster care. We're going to talk about that soon. And they're evicted from an apartment. They lose their car. 6 months later, they cop a plea because that's the only way to get out of jail. And that's how the system and the cycle works. We must end that. It's immoral. It's ungodly. And if churches would really understand that, I think we get tens of thousands of people to be a part of that kind of campaign. And we appreciate that very highly. Let me shift to ask any questions from the audience on this issue of bail reform, criminal justice reform. Any question from the audience? Any statement? Pastor Nash, you work in that system quite a bit.
Thank you so much, Bishop. Let me say this. Let me go back on something that the commissioner said.
It's not on.
Take that on.
You can give him this.
Thank you so much. I want to back up on something you said concerning his message. That why aren't the churches filled? On my business card, it has, in the church that sits in the community, not helping the community socially, economically, and educational, it's just a building taking up space. So much and so many theatrics go on from the pulpit sometimes. From week to week, people are told that God got a blessing for you. And these people are struggling, trying to make ends meet, but every Sunday they are saying, hold on, God got a blessing for you. How could I not be involved in the political process, criminal justice, when people are sitting in the jail? It costs over $400 a day for an incarcerated person. That's right. It doesn't make sense to me, Bishop. And so that's what we got to stop, because you said it right. A person cannot bond themselves out. Okay, I work with a bonding company, and sometimes I do bonds free, just give them money. But it's so unjust and so unfair. Let me address the public defender right quick. Yes. We have a public defender system that from the beginning of the inception of the start of it, they did not want that system. They want to keep the appointment system, because many of the appointed attorneys do not really defend, they just represent. We got to be strong on that. They were trying to get rid of the public defender. Let me show you how insulting they tried to do me. We was in a meeting with the public defender, and thank God for this man here, because if in fact he had not put on the agenda in the court that they came to really fire the public defender, put it on the agenda so the public could hear it, he would have been out.
Would have been fired.
So I was calling a meeting, myself along with our judge and the public defender. He got upset with him because he did not come to him with a problem that it was not law breaking, but it was a problem where he gave some information to an attorney, and that's what he's supposed to do. He didn't break any law, but because he didn't go to the judge, who was his boss, he got upset with him. So they called me in a meeting. In that meeting, he went up one side of the public defendant down the other. And so I said, can I say something? He said, wait a minute, Pastor, I got something for you. This is what he did to me. He shifted a piece of paper over to me with the white attorney's face blackened.
Wow.
He looked at me to get my expression. This is what I said to him. I said, Judge, I'm an old man. I said, man, I've seen this stuff. This is nothing. It doesn't affect me because I've seen it happen too often. Now, the only reason it would have affected me if it had came from this man here, the public defender. We should be talking to the guy that did it, the white guy, the attorney, that did that and put it on Facebook rather than talk about the public defender. So I said this. I said, in my church, every Sunday, I got parishioners worship together and leave church and go get on Facebook and talk about each other. You can't control that. But we got to stand up as pastors, get out of these walls. What you're doing is major. Let me thank you so much, Bishop. What you're doing is major. If, in fact, we can get every pastor, a church doesn't have any side when it comes to fighting issues. So we got to be able to reach these pastors. Thank you for letting me say that.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to switch. I want to talk about immigration reform in our next moment of dialogue. Let's thank Commissioner Ellis and Judge Darrell Jordan for what they shared with us in this area. And in 30 seconds, we'll begin talking about that. And we're talking to our live audience as well. Thank y'all for streaming all over within Power Talk Live with Reverend Al Sharpton. And in 30 seconds, we're talking about immigration reform, DACA, and those babies in cages at the Texas border.
Visit to McAllen, Texas.
Y'all
U.S.
clap.
mayors gathered at a holding facility for immigrant children at the Texas-Mexico border. They accused President Trump of making a humanitarian crisis of his own creation. The mayors from 20 cities across the country are calling for the immediate reunification of immigrant children with their families. Joining me now is Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
President Trump signed the executive orders keeping families together.
Welcome to Power Talk Live. We are having a robust conversation. Our special guest, Houston, Texas today, from New York, a man of great renown, leadership, influence, insight, and one who ignites change, Reverend Al Sharpton. Let's welcome him again to Power Talk Live. Reverend Sharpton, immigration reform has been a hot topic over the last several months, as you know, and of course, we're dealing with DACA and the Dreamers, young people, and of course, Texas is a hotbed for that issue, and of course, we're dealing with babies at the border in cages, and the world has watched this horrific scene of these children separated from their parents at the border. Houston, of course, Texas on that border. It's frontline information issue for us. There are more DACA or Dreamers in Houston, perhaps in any other city in the nation. We've got people to talk about that here this evening. How is that being viewed across the nation as you see it?
Well, I think it has been used as a real divisive issue in a demagogic way. And that is, first of all, when Trump was running and said we need to build a wall, you would think that the only border to the United States was Mexico. He wasn't talking about building a wall in Canada.
Right.
He was talking about building a wall in Mexico. So is this about immigration or is this about profiling? And I think that when you look at the fact, Trump is from New York like I am. And Trump grew up in New York, about 19 years older than me, but in the same generation I did. The problem in New York of those that are coming in, we've always had immigration. It had nothing to do with Mexico. When I went to school growing up, half my classmates came from Europe, some were Russian, some were Caribbean, Jamaican, Trinidadians, Haitians, all of them immigrants. So why all of a sudden do we have this kind of obsession other than we want to play a divide and conquer game based on race? So one, you deal with it as a civil rights issue. Secondly, there's the misnomer that they've sold in the black community that they're taking our jobs. What jobs? We have been doubly unemployed as blacks since slavery ended. Last time you had full employment among blacks is slavery, and we didn't get paid then. So before anybody come over the border from Mexico to Texas or anywhere else, we was already doubly unemployed. They did not take our jobs. Right. But if they could play us against each other, then they win. And one of the things that I think I learned young is they have what they call the crabs in a barrel syndrome, where you just grab the other. So take the Mexican down and we'll climb up. The way that you end the problem of the crabs in the barrels is if the crabs in the barrel unite and take the lid off of the barrel. The problem is the lid on the barrel. The problem ain't the crabs you in the barrel with. Lastly, I think that I went to the border with other faith leaders, and I don't understand how anybody in the faith community can preach St. Matthew 18, who is the greatest in the kingdom? Yeah. And Jesus said, bring unto me a child. Yeah. And watch them take babies out of the hands and arms of their mother and get up and preach and act like that's all right. You got ministers saying that God put Trump in the White House and he taking babies out of mothers' arms, that God decided to give them that baby. You can have all the sex you want. Only God can make a seed fertilize. And to do that and not denounce that, but the reverse is to sanctify it, is a sin if I ever saw one. And I said to some of my brethren and sisters in the evangelical movement, the reason I support refugees is because I'm a Christian, I'm a Baptist minister. Jesus in the Bible, when the angel came and told Joseph, take the baby and his mother and flee to Egypt, because Herod is trying to kill him. Right. They fled to Egypt, which is in Africa, for refuge, which meant that Jesus was a refugee. Yeah. I have to fight for refugees because I believe in a refugee from Bethlehem.
Let the church say amen. Senator, Congressman, in a few days from now, Garcia, you've been out on the front of this battle along with organizations like FIEL and CESAR. This is a passionate issue for you, as many others are. Tell us where we are in this battle here in Texas, and what would be your position? What needs to happen in Washington as you seek to make your arrival in the Congress?
Thank you, Bishop. And I too first want to thank you for putting this together and ensuring that someone at the table can talk about this issue, because it really does impact all of us. And as Reverend Sharpton said, it's not just about Mexico, and it's not just about immigrants from Mexico, because this is a very global city. We have 92 consulates here. That means people from all over the world, whether they're doctors at the medical center that we rely on, or whether they're people from over in the Sugar Land area that are working as engineers or just workers. It's people from all over the world. So thank you for putting it on the table, and thank you for being there with me in that fight, because the baby jail fight is not over. You know, Trump did say that he was reversing his policy, so people thought, okay, well, it's over, but it's not. Right now, there's still 400 children that have not been reunited with their families. 400 children that were torn from their mother's arms and put either in cages or something they call a detention center. But as I like to say, can those kids get out anytime they want to? No. Can they go out and play anytime they want to? No. Can they see their parents anytime they want to? No. Were they dropped off by their parents? No. Well, I think that sounds like a jail to me. Right. Yeah. So just think about that. And Reverend Sharpton, you're absolutely correct. It is about not only the humane thing to do, the moral thing to do, but those of us who do believe in our faith and who practice our faith know that we are all God's children. We're all God's children, and we all have a right to be here. And there's no, every time I hear the word illegal alien, I just cringe, because there's no such thing. There's no such thing. Aliens are from Mars in the movies. Right. Illegals is when you've been convicted and you really have done something, but little babies don't know about whether they can or cannot do something. They follow the parent. It would be no different than if Rodney was driving and one of his children was in there that was under the age of, 10. If he was speeding, are we going to give the speeding ticket to the little child because you're with the parent? No. Well, you cannot blame children coming over, especially why they're coming, and that's the root of the problem. That's right. Yeah. Because it is, Reverend Sharpton, you're hit the nose again. It is about people who are just trying to make a living, people who are coming here to find a better life for their families. It's about not having the income that they need in their country. They're seeking asylum because they've been human trafficked. Yeah. They're seeking asylum because they've been abused by drug lords. They're being abused by gangs. So if you had the opportunity to save your child and get him away from that, wouldn't you do that? Yes. And I don't think it's just the mamas, it's everybody. So I think, you know, and I'm gonna quote the bishop here because he came and did a prayer at one of our rallies, and you may remember that. He said, babies belong in cradles, not cages. Yes. Babies belong in cradles and not cages. Just like the baby you were speaking of, Reverend Sharpton, in the Bible. It was all about the baby in the cradle.
That's right.
Yeah.
So this fight is about the baby in the cradle, and I want you all to think about it. Right now, it's a baby in the cradle in the term of an immigrant. Yeah. If they succeed, whose baby will they come after next? Who will be next? So that's why we all have to fight together, because it impacts all of us. It's un-American, it's un-Christian, it's unconscionable, it's immoral. Think of all those bad names. It's all of those plus 10. Because this is just one of the most heartless policies that I've ever seen. That, frankly, I wish I could get you all to just get a basket and put a little heart in there and let's all send it to the White House. Because we've got to stop it, and the way we're going to do that is to take back the Congress for the House of the Democrats. You know, reverse that policy, repeal and replace ICE, and we need to make sure that we protect the DREAM Act and the DACA kids. And I know my friend over there will talk about those issues, but we've got to do more. So that's one of the reasons I'm running for Congress. And I'm so glad that we're looking at issues of working together, because none of us can do it alone. We're all targets under this administration. So the only thing we can do is work and work hard. And I know tonight, as I leave early, and I'm excusing myself shortly, you know, I'm helping host together with the commissioner and others a fundraiser for Stacey Abrams, who are working real hard to make her history being the first African-American woman elected to a governorship in this great state country of ours. Because we all have to work together. And I know people always say, well, you're going to win, you know, you're poised to be the first Latina to be elected to Congress. It's like, no. I'm running because I want to be the first woman from Thurgood Marshall School of Law, TSU, to be elected. I was talking to the dean. I said, you know, so I'll be the first woman and the first Hispanic. And he goes, yep. I said, well, see, I'm going to make two histories. Because I believed in Thurgood Marshall. That's how I went to law school, because he was all about social change and working for poor people and making sure that everybody had economic security so we could have a fair shot at the American dream. And that's what I intend to do in Congress. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll speak prophetically, Congresswoman. I'm speaking prophetically. All right, we appreciate you. And we know the two of you have to rush out. And we appreciate you making the effort to be here. And we're not going to be a whole lot longer, so y'all don't rush out. The forum continues, but we'll be updating Sylvia and Rodney. That's all right. That's just a two. I'm mad as hell. That's the kind of church member I like right there. I like a church member that can just speak it out. Cesar, the senator talked about the babies mostly. You're working with DACA, with Fiel, and Reverend, I want you to know that this young man has been doing a valiant job working with Dreamers. If you will, engage with Reverend Sharpton as to what you're doing, and ask anything you want to ask of him from a national and higher level.
Yes, well, good afternoon. Once again, thank you, Bishop Dixon, for this opportunity. Thank you for Reverend Al Sharpton. To me, it's an honor to be here because I've read about, you know, civil rights movement, and I followed in, you know, the teachings of those great people who have come before us who have offered us an opportunity to fight this fight. My name is Cesar Espinosa, and I'm Executive Director of Fiel, and I am undocumented and unafraid. I have On August 30th, I completed my 27th year of being here in the United States, and at 33 years old, there's still no option for me to adjust status through any family means, even though I do have relatives who are U.S. citizens. And it's really frustrating because I'm college educated. I obviously speak the language. I obviously have studied here. I've obviously have learned and continue to give back to our communities. But it's always a challenge. In a city such as Houston, this is an even bigger challenge. In the city of Houston, there's 600,000 undocumented immigrants, meaning that 1 out of every 10 people.
600,000.
600,000, meaning that 1 out of every 10 people does not have papers. So it's a huge population, and we see, you know, we do have 3 hours to talk about this, right? Because okay, immigration is such an important and vital part of our economy. But more than anything, it's also an important, vital part of our society. At a country that's based off of immigrants that has thrived because of the works that immigrants from many nations have come and thrived here and given back so much to the United States. So just a couple of points that I want to touch on is number one, I do want to thank Bishop Dixon for having the courage to have one of the first intersectional DACA conversations a couple of months ago. We were here and we talked about similarities that we have within our communities. We talked about things that we can agree on and really demystified a lot of the myths that are out there that look to pin our communities against each other so we can keep each other busy while attacking really the root of the problem, which is a lot of the things that we face, which include white supremacy and many other things that look to keep us down.
On that point, I want you to ask Reverend Sharpton this. No, I want you to ask him if he would consider helping us with this dialogue with national black church leaders and national leaders in the DACA movement, because we do have to merge our communities, Reverend. This is a point, and that's what the part of, keep your thought. What can we do to engage our community and Fiel and the Latino community who are working so prevalently on this moment?
Well, I think that the dialogue has to be with national faith leaders and people like him, so that, one, we can challenge people like you and I that this is a moral issue and they're obligated to. But we need the dialogue so he can tell us how to fit in and do it. Because a lot of times we can want to do something and be misguided in how we do it. So we need the people on the front lines like him that are willing to suffer. You heard him start by saying, I'm undocumented, but I'm unafraid. You need people that would put that kind of risk, that study this and do this every day to be able to give us the mechanism. So I would certainly be part of helping to facilitate that, and I think you need to do it.
Thank you, sir. Take 1 more minute, and then we're going to...
Yeah. Okay. So just 2 things. Number one is, it's important we also talk about the other immigrants, because a lot of people, they look at a person who speaks English like myself, who studied here, like the perfect immigrant, and they want to just go with that because it's a perfect image. But you know, the real dreamers are our parents, who had the dream to bring us here, to have the courage to come to a country where they did not know the language, where they did not know the culture, and still managed to put us, you know, my mom, I love her, shout out to my mom, single mother of 3 kids, put all 3 of us through college, and we made it happen while being undocumented. And so, but I think it's important that we further the conversation. I would also invite to talk about the 11 million undocumented people that exist among us, that seek to exist, to be out of the shadows and to continue to thrive. And lastly, in terms of the baby jails, of the baby detention centers, if they were to hold U.S. children in cages in other countries, what would happen? What would happen? There would be a cry. There would be. What would happen? So we have to stop this hypocritical narrative that it's okay for us to do this when it's not okay for this to be done to us. And I, with you, would welcome you to join us in sitting in front of those buses so that not one more kid can be detained. And we will stop those buses and we will fight the policies that look to detain, because just a couple of days ago, they're now saying that they're going to hold children indefinitely in detention centers. So let's sit on that. Let's hope. I welcome the conversation. I would look forward to continuing this work. Thank you, Bishop Dixon.
We'll work
Thank
it
you,
out.
Reverend Sharpton.
Thank you, Cesar. As we think through that, the next segment I want to bring to the conversation is the issue of trafficking. Both Senator Garcia as well as Cesar talking about the babies at the border, I want us to understand how all of this ties together. Someone else mentioned foster children. Texas and Houston has an alarming rate of sex human trafficking in general, and more particular with children. And brothers and sisters, I want you to hear a little information about that. Reverend Sharpton talked about the cities like New York being so diversified. Houston and this city, 92 consulates here. We're on the border of Mexico. I-10 is the most trafficked corridor in the nation, from Mexico all the way through to Florida to the East Coast. We have Jacqueline Aluto here and Kathy Griffin. These ladies work tirelessly in this area. And let me set the ground rule here. I need us to be a bit more brisk with our topics so that we can end at the right time. But I want you to hear them. In 30 seconds, we're coming right back to deal with sex, human trafficking. Don't you touch your dial. More in Power Talk Live in just 30 seconds.
That you have to talk about, but you don't want to because you don't want to think that that happens.
Welcome back to Empower Talk Live. This is your host, Reverend James Dixon, and I am honored that you have joined us, and we're delighted that in Houston, Texas, for this special Empower Talk Live session is the iconic, legendary leader, powerful voice, public voice, God's preacher and prophet, Reverend Al Sharpton. Let's welcome him. Reverend, I was on your show some years ago. I never thought that I'd have you on my show. I didn't even have a show at the time. I just thought about that, and had the chance to be with you on live radio nationally. And so I appreciate the exposure that you've shared with me, endorsing my books and everything else, and just shows you what investment would do. So I just want to say publicly, thank you for mentoring me, thank you for guiding, thank you for encouraging, and for inspiring, because I wouldn't be a me without a you. So I appreciate that. Give him a hand for all that he has done. Sex, human trafficking is a major concern nationally, and Texas is a hotbed for that. Would you want to make a statement? I want to hear them first. All right, Jacqueline, would you give us an opening statement about sex, human trafficking, and why this issue drove you from the East Coast to Texas to confront it?
Well, thank you for having me, Bishop. I appreciate it. You are definitely an activist at heart, which is why I love this church. Really what happened 4 years ago is when I was in New Jersey, I did a film called Not in My Backyard about the foster care system in New Jersey when Corzine was the governor. And what was happening was a lot of girls were going missing and a lot of kids were being trafficked. And ironically, Goldman Sachs had a percentage of a website called Backpage that people know, which would sell children. When I came here 4 years ago, I really came here because there was a New York advocacy group called Children's Right Inc. that had made a discovery that 75% of children in the foster care system in Texas were being sexually abused, raped, assaulted, sex trafficked, murdered, missing. And I said, well, I guess this is going to be my next documentary.
Pause. Mm-hmm. You said 75%.
75%.
Repeat that statement, please.
75%. And this wasn't my research, this was a judge's research. And so they actually demanded that Texas reallocate the money because the state of Texas gets $1.9 billion, but not $1.9 billion goes to Child Protective Services. So what's happening is that you have children, because there are United States children put in cages and in detention centers. And so I want to touch on this because people just don't talk about this, and I don't understand. I don't know if it's because these are poor U.S. children. The majority of them are children of color. But when you go into the foster care system, in Texas, a lot of times they do not have enough beds. So you sleep on the floors of CPS offices. Now, a state that gets $1.9 billion, and we're not even using all of that budget, I believe it's $900 million that's being used. $1 billion is being used for other things. So then the other problem is they put these children in detention centers and juvenile centers. And so this is where it's profit over people. Every state gets more money, the level of stress and emotional distress that children get. So as soon as you're putting them on floors and they're in detention centers and they've moved around 9 times in 1 year, by the time they've even moved to the second home, their papers for their schools, they're not even gonna pass. So for me, I truly believe in, when we're really gonna talk about dynamics of the war on poverty and oppression, it really starts in the foster care system, because 87% of children who are sex trafficked in the United States are on the system. And so it's 87%. In Texas, we're only focusing on wealthy white girls that have gone missing in the wealthiest states. And the narrative is that that's the hunting ground. Now, don't get me wrong. No child is safe anymore with sex trafficking. However, there are 7 cartels that control the border. And so I have a few different theories in the border, and I'm not going to be popular, but I'm not here to be popular. I'm here to fight for justice. The border is a very dangerous place. It's a $150 billion industry, human trafficking. And so these children are being sex trafficked, organ trafficked, and drug muled. We are making so much money off of these children. And when you go into the foster care system, you have no First Amendment rights. So when you are being abused, there's no one to stand up for you, which is why we created the prototype to track children, because when I came here, I met with every state senator. No one knows how many children are missing in foster care. And the answer to me was, well, we didn't keep track of the ones that didn't want to stay there. The ones that didn't want to stay there, you're talking about children that are being severely abused. They're running because no one is taking care of them. And so those are easy to traffic. By law, we're supposed to say as soon as these children go missing. These children are not being reported. So in Texas alone, we have no idea not only how many children are in foster care, but how many have gone missing. However, the state of Texas will get a check per every child that is supposed to be in the system that we cannot locate. And so when you're talking about slavery and the sex slave trade and human trafficking and organ trafficking and sex trafficking, and these children, they do not have a success rate to succeed. They will either go into a life of crime, they will go into jail, they will die, and then the other horrible part is they'll groom your other children for sex trafficking, which is the other issue right now in the United States, largely in Texas. I'm working on a case in Virginia right now, but children are grooming other children, and the most popular age are 12 years old. So when people say, well, this is the narrative I get. Well, these aren't our children, and this isn't our community, and we wouldn't raise our kids like that. It's in every community. This is an epidemic, and this is a problem. And when we turn our backs and we abandon innocent people that need help, this is now what's happening. So if you're wondering in Texas, when you send your children to school, why they're being groomed by other children, it's because we're not having an honest conversation. And the honest conversation is that in every school, we need to train the administrators to say, this is what grooming looks like, this is what trafficking looks like. We also need to have another honest conversation and say, why do caseworkers in the foster care system have 112 kids that have gone missing? And to Fidel's narrative, once children come over the border, they automatically go into the foster care system. So undocumented children and poor communities in foster care, they're all in the system. And so your top administrators are making a ton of money. However, there is no justice for all these kids that are suffering. And 75% is just not, it's unacceptable.
Let me ask you a question. How many of us here, this is not a right or wrong question, it's just a question. How many of us in this room tonight have never or have ever read any book that deals with sex and human trafficking? You have. Okay. You have. You have read a book. Okay. Okay. All right. That's a small percentage of us. This is not a right or wrong question. How many of us has ever gone on the internet to do your own research? And that's not a right or wrong question. I'm dealing with the fact of how obscure this is, how out of sight and invisible it is. Have you ever gone on your own research tangent? Okay, only a couple of us. Now, how many of us are parents? Okay, so all of us are parents, and we are grossly uninformed about one of the most severe crises of our times. Now, if you multiply that out throughout our congregations and the city of Houston and the state of Texas, I think therein lies the problem. Because most people have never heard just the statement that Jacqueline Aluto has just made concerning the high numbers of children that are being trafficked. So we have an education issue. An education issue. If leaders don't know, parents don't know, schools don't know, then it makes it convenient for the culprits to continue the evil. Dr. Sharpton, can you speak to that?
I think you and she raised the critical issue, because when we look at the fact that these children cannot speak for themselves, if we don't verbalize and vocalize it and support efforts like what she's done with documentaries and fighting for justice, they become invisible and marginalized as humans. And particularly those of us in the church community and the black church community that are going to have a lot of things to say next year about we've been here 400 years and what they did to us, and they're doing it right now to children. What they did to us, and they are still doing to us, but they're doing it under the veil of darkness, and we are the ones that are allowing it to happen. I think that it is an outrage. When she said, now I lead National Action Network and do an MSNBC TV show and a radio show, and I had no idea 75% of the kids in foster care in the state were being abused. So I know most of y'all didn't. And I read everything because that's part of what I do, is radio and TV. This is an outrage that has been this quiet. This ought to be front and center in terms of what we discuss in this country.
And I'm saying that because you're right. We need to get persons like Jacqueline who have this kind of calling, passion, heart, insight, and competence in our churches, right? I mean, we ought to have her on a circuit every Sunday speaking for 10 minutes. And then after church, to hold question and answer sessions. Kathy Griffin is sitting next to Jacqueline, and Kathy, you know a lot about this whole issue and industry, but talk to us specifically about how children are being groomed in schools, because we send our children to school. The law says we have to do it. We do it because we want to do it. We want them educated. But what's happening with children and trafficking in schools specifically?
Again, thank you, Bishop. It's my honor to be here, for you to actually be listening to this conversation, because we eat, sleep, and breathe this. Hurt people hurt other people, and sick people make other people sick. And the grooming techniques change monthly, but one piece of it that is staying in place is that they're using individuals. Right now, the bully, the girl that's gonna bully the other girl, the trafficker, the pimp, the controller, gets that girl that bullied the little low self-esteem girl, the little fat girl, the one with the disability, the one with the thick glasses. Now that you've bullied her, I need you to go befriend her and make her your best friend and take her under your wing. And then this low self-esteem, abandoned, socially awkward individual is like, oh my God, I have a real friend now. And they lure them in under false pretense of having somebody that cares about them, because I gotta back it up, Bishop. Everybody that's talking about sex trafficking and this and human trafficking, let me cut that out the way. Throw it back there. This generational curse that the churches are not talking about has started in a lot of our homes. Generations from incest, sexual abuse, mama's boyfriend touching, babysitters, brothers touching, grandpas, fathers, everybody. Let me see that thing type. A lot of people think that sexual trauma and sexual abuse comes from somebody physically doing something. Not all the time when you have a child's mind. Why is it right now you can pick up this demonic machine and see 2- and 3-year-olds twerking and cussing and smoking blunts and talking about pimps and hoes and strippers and money and 10 toes down? That's prostitution talk. And great-great-grandmothers and grandmothers and mothers, even back in my era where I grew up in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, in the country, all kind of stuff going down there, Bishop. The mothers tell the daughters, and I don't think intentionally they were programming us to be prostitutes, but they would tell you, go find you the pastor, the banker, the doctor, the police officer, the soldier, the teacher, the whatever, and make sure you marry somebody that's got something. You sitting on a gold mine. What they did for generations is groomed the future us to be gold diggers, prostitutes, and it kills me because I'm in the trenches, and I run the largest prostitution, sex trafficking rehabilitation program in this country. Right. I got 4,700 at any given time, but you don't see that plastered all over the place.
Right.
Because, first of all, back in my day, growing up in Hattiesburg and marching with Vernon Damer and Medgar Evers, and being in the end of, how did I go from that to being a $30,000 a month crackhead prostitute that ended up in and out of jail? And I never got out. And I know about Harris County, trust me. But none of us said when we grow up we want to be prostitutes.
Right.
But Bishop, in the church,
Yeah.
and Jacqueline has these numbers, if you talk to individuals that have been trafficked or sexually abused, and you ask them where it happened or who did it, even in the clergy, the numbers are staggering from individuals that went to their church, their pastor, their preacher, their deacon, their bishop, and something sexual occurred. And it was just thrown under the rug. And I'm not trying to throw the church people up, but I'm just saying pastors are going to have to bring this conversation up and quit hiding from it, because if we wouldn't have all this if it wasn't a bunch of sexual damage that has been implanted as children.
So Kathy, what I'm saying, and this is a national conversation,
Yes.
and a local conversation, and of course Reverend Sharpton has a national platform. And I know
And you know, my people come from all over the country.
And I see him thinking and taking notes here now about what could happen and how he could help, because this needs to be a national conversation.
Yes, it does.
Right, and it needs to come from our community and from our leadership. My point is, today we've got Pastor Nash, Pastor Washington, we've got my good friend at the First Metropolitan Church, and you know we got Dr. Ogletree here,
Yes,
Major
yes,
Eddie's a school board member, and we've had Pastor Jamel Johnson, Pastor E.A. Deckard. That's 5, 6, 7 pastors. That means for the next 7 weeks you could be speaking to churches. My point is the education piece.
Bishop,
is
you talked about Pastor Nash.
Yes.
One pastor, not no mega church. I would not be sitting here
We're not.
as the human trafficking director for the Harris County Constable's Office right now if it hadn't been for this little country preacher from the hood that went down there and fought. No, this is real. Y'all got to understand, I was looking at 35 years day for day for having an empty crack pipe and my 6th prostitution case, which that time I wasn't even prostituting, I just needed a ride. Seriously, I'm just saying. But I was guilty, I was a prostitute, I'm just saying. And but we were 3 strikes you out, and had I not had that pipe in my bra, I wouldn't have been the guinea pig for the first drug court here. And they told me, that Republican judge told me, and the DA, if I messed up one time, I would do a serve-all of 35 years.
Day for day.
And day for day. And I didn't break in your house. I didn't steal your car. I was molested. I was raped. I was sexually abused. I was lied to about a lot. Secrets made me sick. And he started that, got those people to let us have that court, and I did everything that I was supposed to do because I couldn't do 35 years day for day for having an empty crack pipe and doing what I had to do to support my habit because I was sexually abused before that.
So what you're saying is we lock sick people up,
Yes.
treat them as criminals.
Yes,
You would
and
have
then
had-
call them those prostitutes, those
Right,
thieves,
yeah.
those this. It
so-
started somewhere
so-
else.
But legislation, I have to say this,
Okay.
because he has a national platform. Legislation has to change. And I can give you numerous examples. In Texas, they changed it now where to marry children brides, it's 16. I mean, these are problems. The back page epidemic with the FOSTA-SESTA bill that was just passed, that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee helped us make amendments to restitution. Under the NAFTA treaty, that bill is abolished, which means that back page and all these pages that sell people, so when you see people in Africa lined up with chains, understand that under that treaty, if we don't amend that bill again or fight for a new bill, it will be legal to sell people. And the largest profit is selling children because people want to have sex with children. And because it is more of a punishment to sell drugs than to sell people. It is more lucrative for rings and people that have organized crimes businesses to sell people. So my thing is, we should tell you what these laws are, because we need to start fighting for them on a national level. And that's what we have to do.
Cases stick, Pastor, Reverend Sharpton and Bishop, because the police will say, well, we have to investigate, and that's why the trafficker goes free, and the girls are actually now getting the charges when they have been victimized and hurt.
I'm
so frustrated.
This is such a horrific and multi-layered, multi-pronged problem, and you know, it was 20 years ago that I started thinking about sex trafficking and writing about it, reading about it. And I was kind of like by myself. I did not know who to talk to about it because there was no sex trafficking movement at the time.
The people that's doing it, Bishop, but now they've got money out there, and the people that's getting the money don't have a clue about what to do.
Yeah, well,
they don't care.
Well, the authentic people working on it in this room, I do know that. And I know Reverend Sharpton is processing. I see him wincing just thinking through these statistics and this information. And Reverend, I'd love for us to have a conversation beyond today. Yeah, talk about that. Yeah, and then schools. I know our school board president had to leave, Ronald Skillen Jones, but we need education in churches and in schools because children. A girl gets invited to go to the mall with a friend, like a girl at the schools that our children attend. That girl goes to the mall. She meets her friend's boyfriend at the mall. The boyfriend says, let's have lunch. They have lunch. The boyfriend says, there's a party. The girl says, let's go to the party. They go to the party. There's something dropped in the drink of the girl who's invited. She's molested and raped. Things happen that she's afraid to tell her parents, and all of a sudden she is caught in the trap of trafficking. It happens just that quickly, just that easily. And yes, ma'am.
I think that we need to declare human trafficking as a public health issue.
Yes, and we've talked about that as well. What it is. It is a public health issue. You're absolutely correct. And so,
they're targeting, they're recruiting now and have been, but the church
is a hotbed for recruiting.
It used to be the mall, but they're actually coming to the church.
So,
the churches.
Let me, I know we can talk about this.
Yeah.
And these ladies are passionate. Now, the next time we have a forum just on this, it ought to be packed with pastors, churches, school people, leaders, and everyone else because it is multi-layered. I must switch because we got two topics I'm going to try to cover as quickly as we possibly can, but they're both equally important, would be out. And one has to do with I'm saving education for the last go out, and but I want to talk just a minute about the wealth gap and the housing gap, home ownership. 50 years after the Fair Housing Act 1968 was signed, 3 weeks after Dr. King's assassination, today, black home ownership is the same percentage 50 years later. And NARAB, the National Association of Realtors and Brokers, working on that nationally with a movement. Our leader here in Houston is Kimberly Barnes Henson, and give her a hand. And the vision, of course, 2 million new black home owners in the next 5 years. Kim, talk about why that's important and what you run. What are you up against when you talk about black home ownership and getting blacks in the houses?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Bishop. Bishop has not said, but he is one of our faith-based champions for this movement. We have Pastor Decker there that's also been a host and a loud voice for this issue for our organization. So I want to say thank you, and Reverend Al Sharpton, thank you, sir, for being here tonight as we discuss these issues. But when we talk about the wealth gap, I think it's 7 cents for every dollar that a Caucasian person has is in the black household. That's a huge disparity.
7 cents to a dollar.
7 cents to every dollar. And we all know that in America, wealth is generally stemmed from housing, In the last mortgage debacle we had, African Americans are the only race of people who did not recoup what they lost. Every other race have since recouped from 2007 to 2008 the wealth that they lost and surpassed the numbers. We have not. The question is why? We talk about fair housing and that we're 50 years out, and now we have more educated black people than we've ever had before, and they said that education was one of the main barriers that we needed to overcome. We've since overcome that, yet the number has not moved. So I say that we've got a different point that we need to start looking at. When you don't own the software that approves the loans and you're able to systemically create racism within that software that no one else can review because it is your proprietary property, it's an issue. And no one's talking about this, but we have to talk about it because we have FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. They're all setting rules and regulations where at a 580 credit score you can get into a home. But by the time you get to Bank of America, Wells Fargo, who are all partners of ours, we love them, why is it that the credit score has to be 620, 640? When all of these overlays are now applied, they're applied so that people who look like me and many of you cannot qualify, because once we level the economic playing field, America, we have a problem. Because no longer can those people who have sat in power continue to sit in power and depress those of us when we bring together the economic barrier. So we have a solution to this. And our solution nationally is starting with a program that we call 2M and 5. 2M and 5. That means that we are on the grounds, 93 chapters strong across the country, to put 2 million African American homeowners into homes over the next 5 years. Now, if we haven't had the needle move in 50 years, how many of you realize how big of a task that actually is? So we've reached out to Bishop Dixon and other pastors, not just locally here, it's a national movement, because in the black community, our base has been the church, and we've moved away from that. From every topic that I've listened to, as I sat here and I heard, if we get back to our roots and to the base, educating there, you see, they used to go in and they planned the civil rights movement. When they came out, you know, Reverend Al Sharpton, it was happening in the churches. And that's where the planning and the education came from. So we have to get back there because that is the foundation of the area. So we are going to the churches and we're asking you pastors to join this movement so that we can come into the church, and we're not just going to come in and talk. We're setting up systems and programs so that individuals are not only educated to get into a home, but guess what? They're being taught how to maintain the home and then pass on the legacy of wealth so we can close the wealth gap.
Kim, let me say, because I've spoken for the local, the state, and with the national effort. Let me tell you, this is such a major need. We've got to be on a crusade for it. And I would that all of us here tonight, how many of you own your own home? Do you own the home? Most of us here are homeowners. I want to tell you is that the age comes down under 50 and 40. It's incredibly low. And we've got to understand that the survival of our community is going to depend on owning land. I will say this, you don't have authentic citizenship without ownership. You cannot, please hear me, you don't have authentic citizenship. Full citizenship in America requires ownership. The laws are written in favor of the landowner. So you cannot exercise full rights as citizenship without ownership. And Kim, I want to make sure the pastors here I know are all already aware, but we need ministries in churches, Reverend Sharpler, that deal with economic wealth empowerment, like we're talking about homeownership and sex trafficking. And I'm proud to say Kathy Griffin is a member of this church, and we are working in that area because we've got to have programs and projects that really move the needle. One church, one neighborhood, one community at a time. Reverend, the wealth gap is widening. And I know you talk about this. Tell us, what must we do to start reversing this negative trend, and how do we get the message to our people, and what are our challenges that we have to collectively work together to overcome?
Well, I think she articulated it well, because I think that if you look at the civil rights movement that she referred to, which was church-based, one of the reasons that the church could house the civil rights movement and the founding of black colleges and black political movements is we owned the church. It wasn't just that we were religious, it was something that we owned, and nobody had to give us permission to do whatever we wanted to do. And I think that we have gotten away from that. Church was not only our religious headquarters, it was our education headquarters, our political headquarters, our economic headquarters. When Dr. King was killed, Dr. King not only had a poor people's campaign to deal with economic equality, he had what he called Operation Breadbasket, which I was youth director in New York. That's where I started at 13. And it was to deal with black wealth and to make sure whoever did business in our community, as we being consumers, had to hire contractors, had to bank in our banks, had to do business with us, or we would boycott them. America, corporate world, embraced us being poor. That's charity. But didn't embrace the breadbasket side to deal with economic equality, which would deal with ownership and wealth. And somewhere along the line, tricked us into thinking that there was something noble about being broke. And people that grew up wealthy could afford to go out for a season or a decade and play broke. We was really broke. And they could go home and we would not be able to do that. And I think the church has got to reorientate our community to, well, you know, in my own family, my great-grandmother died with hundreds of acres of land she owned in Alabama. I've got cousins that have master's degrees and get evicted twice a year. What did she understand that they didn't understand with master's degrees? Because we've almost regressed, and I put it on churches, in our understanding of economics and wealth. And we began over-engaging in other things, including politics. Politics without an economic plan is just doing civil service. In other communities, they elect politicians to serve their economic interests. We elect politicians to give some of our friends a job as to whatever. And I think we've got to start doing that again. The most egregious thing I've seen is when you deal with pension fund investments. To give you an example. I met with a union leader not long ago. 80%, I think the exact figure, 82%, of his union members and pensioners were black and Latino. I asked him, how many of your money managers are black and Latino? None. His money managers, Bishop, lend money to developers. Developers go in and gentrify the community Grandma is financing her own removal. It's bad enough they taking your land under eminent domain.
Yeah.
But what's worse is you don't realize they're using your money to do it. Because if you all right here that are older, that have got pension plans, don't know who's investing your pension at your union or your job, you may be paying for who is uprooting you. Because we don't think about the economics. And that's where we've got to go. What she's saying is absolutely vital to what we need to be doing in the faith community. They got me so on the sex trafficking thing. She had to be good to get me off that, because I didn't know whether I was going with him and lay in front of the bus or going with them. Y'all got me all messed up in here tonight.
Well, Doc, we got one more thing to mess you up on, and that's public education. And all these subjects are obviously interrelated. Dr. James Douglas, the president of the NAACP here in Houston, is an amazing man, and he is, amongst several things, he is on a real mission as it relates to public education and what's happening in our schools. We have, to my immediate right, Dr. Patricia Williams, who is an amazing educator herself. She's the founder of the Imani School. This is a Christian school that's primarily attended by black youth. It is an amazing jewel, one of a kind in our community, and her heart for children is incredible. But she aches not only for the children who are in her school, but the tens of thousands and millions of children who don't get exposed to this level of education simply because they can't afford it. Dr. Douglas, you have been a warrior in relation to public education. Talk to us about what you see and engage Reverend Sharpton here on this.
Well, Bishop, first, thanks for having this program. But I guess now, after listening to all the issues, I'm where Reverend Sharpton is. We have 22 committees in the Houston branch of the NAACP dealing with 22 different issues as it relates to civil rights. I told everyone in the NAACP when I became president that my #1 issue was education. But listening to all of what everyone said, I grew up in the 60s under Reverend Lawson. And when I think back to the 60s, one of the reasons we were somewhat successful is that we were all unified. And we were all unified around one issue, and that was defeat segregation. And everybody heard the same. Didn't matter whether you were a doctor and had a lot of money. Didn't matter whether you worked in a steel mill. Didn't matter whether you were a janitor or a butler. Your #1 issue as an African American was segregation. So we all worked together because we all had a common enemy. I listened to sex trafficking. I listened to everything. The problem is now we don't all have the same enemy. Education is important to me because I know where I came from. I know I wouldn't be where I am now if I didn't have an education. When I think to all the friends I had in college who are doing well now, it is all because they got an education. Education allows us the wherewithal to deal with a lot of the issues that we're talking about. I'm not saying it's the answer to all the questions, but it definitely Now, this is what happened. We saw the segregation, and people always say, well, Brown really didn't achieve what it set out to achieve. Brown was one of the most important decisions that could have ever been made as far as the advancement of African Americans are concerned. Because Brown was more than about integration in the public schools. Because until we got integration in public schools, we didn't have integration anywhere else. Yeah. So at least a lot of the rights we have, we've gained because of Brown. But the problem with public education now, and I remember I was thinking when people were talking, and I remember in high school when we were talking about the difference, capitalism, socialism, and communism, I said to my teacher one day, I said, to me, the best theory is communism. But the only problem with communism is that it depends on the righteousness of man, and man is not righteous. Yeah. And so it'll never work. And that's a part of the problem now, is the people who have the wherewithal and the resources to address a lot of these issues are not hurt by these issues, and so they don't get involved. Yeah. You know, I remember Jarvis Johnson always talks about all of us moving to the woods, the woodlands and the lands. I mean, the pearland and sugarland and woodlands. And when we move out, because I remember one day a few years ago, I went to homecoming for Cashmere's high school. We played Jones. Now, those of you who are old enough to know about the Thunder Soul, which was one of the greatest bands in the world, I go to the game, and Cashmere had 20 pieces, 20 in their band. Jones had 6. They couldn't even take the field at halftime because they didn't have enough band members. So my classmates are saying, God, what happened to the band? So I asked one, I turned around, I said, where do you live? I live off of Beltway 8. I said, where do you live? I live in Sugarland. I said, where do you live? I live in Woodlands. I said, that's what happened to the band. We all abandoned our neighborhoods. And so I say to people in the NAACP, what our biggest job is to get the people who don't hurt as much to help the people that hurt. Yeah. I mean, if we could get people who have, because this is what happened in education. We integrated, all right? But equalitative education is more important than integration. Yeah. We've got to understand that. Equalitative education is more important than integration, because if you look at what happens in Houston now, there's some very good academic programs now. Only 6% of the students in HISD are white. Yeah. All the best programs, though, are in white neighborhoods. Yeah. Even though there are no white kids there. So that means our kids that grow up in Fifth Ward or Sunnyside or Acres Home, they got to ride the bus 2 hours a day to and from school just to go somewhere to get a good education. This is what I talk about when I talk about those people who care, and I'm going to close with this. I said to the members of the NAACP, I said, look, you all say you're interested. When white people are interested in something, they show up. When there's an issue that affects whites at the school board, you go there, they pack the place. All right, I said, there is an issue that affects African Americans that's coming up next week. I need everybody to sign up to speak and show up. You know how many people signed up to speak? 2. Yeah. 2. Yeah. So you know, I don't know how to get people who live outside of the city in these to care about what's happening in Cashmere, what's happening in Acres Home, what's happening in Third Ward, what's happening in Sunnyside, because it's all of our money now. People, and I said this earlier in a meeting that I was in, Commissioner Ellis is one of the most committed civil rights people I've ever met. He is the first commissioner who dealt with anything other than roads and bridges.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
And so, right, so you understand we have a lot more power
than we use.
Right. But we've got to unify, and those people, because what happens when, and choice, and I tell people, when they talked about closing Yakes a few years ago, there were 700 students who were zoned to Yakes that were going to school at Bel Air in Lamar. Now, not only do you take the best students out of the school, generally, when you take the best students, you take the best parents away out of the school also. And then you wonder why the schools there don't perform the way that they ought to be performing.
Yeah, so let me
say one quick thing. The students that are left in the schools, those are the parents and the students of the population that I'm talking about that have those tremendous generational curses attached to their lives. And it still goes back to sexual abuse, sexual trauma, and that the parents now will go cuss the teacher out. If the teacher say, you can't wear them booty shorts and that halter top. We weren't allowed to dress like that. And then I've had young people tell me, I don't need an education. Beyonce didn't graduate, and they gave her a degree. So I'm going to get famous. I'm going to be on the pole, because the Kardashians and Nicki Minaj, I'm just saying, you got to look at that mentality, and that's the mentality that's got to be healed.
So let me say this, and Reverend, I want you to meet and hear from Dr. Patricia Williams, because I know she was not scheduled to be on this panel, but wherever she shows up, she is potent. I promise you that. My son, who attends the school, James, come here just a second. I want to do this. I just thought of this. Just come here very quickly. And this is your student. All right. Now, we were at lunch yesterday. He's trying to get me to get him these new Kyrie tennis shoes, I think it is. I don't know what they're called. Huh? Kyrie 4s. Now, so he said, Daddy, I'm earning it. And so tell me the definitions and the math stuff that you started asking me that I know at the table. Just share that with me. Go ahead.
Specifically anything?
Yes.
So I was telling
Just ask me, just like you did.
Did you know what the definition for density was, or?
Keep going. What about the spheres, the stratosphere, all the
the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, the biosphere.
Okay. What about the 7 regions, something?
Oh, the 7 regions of the United States that geographers.
What are those?
The Canadian Shield, the humid subtropical, humid continental, coastal plains, and the Gulf.
Okay. Now what about the math stuff? What you talking about?
The math?
The formula, yes.
Oh, the understand the problem, solve it, and then check it.
That's called the what?
Huh?
What's the acronym for it?
UPSC.
Okay. All right. Now, he read off about 20 more things to me, and I said, I wonder how many children in the average public school in the 6th grade are learning those things. Now he's Now I'm saying to us, this is what's happening at the Imani School, okay? That this lady founded and is leading. His father just happens to be scraping up love offerings and trying to preach to pay for that. Most parents can't. I weep when I look at the children in our church, in our neighborhood, who don't have access to that. Dr. Williams, what motivated you to start this school, and why can't we get what you do done in public schools? Thank you, sir.
Is he gonna get the shoes?
Is he gonna get the shoes? He's on his way. He's on his way. He's on his way. Give him a hand, y'all. Give him a hand. He's on his way.
I agree, James. You earned those shoes, baby. I think the reality is that we can do what we're doing at the Imani School can be done in any school. Something that I wanted you to know is that one of the central civil rights issues now facing us, in addition to these things, is the achievement gap in education. This is so serious. The average, check this out now, the average high school African American child that graduates from 12th grade has the educational equivalency and the skills of an 8th grade child. There's a 4-year achievement gap between our children. Now I want you to understand, I didn't say between low income African American children. This is African American children, period. This is across the spectrum. This is the average. Think about what that means for us economically. You can't force someone to hire a job when you have a job that requires a high school education. You can't force them to hire you with an 8th grade skills. So the achievement gap in education has got to be addressed. And I think I'm much more practical than most people, and I believe that we have a responsibility, each one of us in our own homes. Yeah. I always say we can't expect anybody to care more about our children than we do. And meaning no disrespect, you would not ever, you can't even imagine Jews sending their children to the Arabs to be educated. And yet we trust our children in totality to someone who may or may not have their best interest at heart. There was a study done called the Haru Report, and it said that the single, check this out, the single most damaging factor in limiting the education and achievement of African American children is the belief that they cannot learn and the acceptance of their substandard performance as being inevitable. Another thing that I think it's urgent that we as a community know, there's been a lot of brain research going on now about how learning occurs and about the process of the brain and which part of the brain controls learning and which part of the brain controls emotions and problem solving. What they've discovered has been propelled, for one of the reasons, is because they've been trying to figure out why is it that Asian families and Asian children are taking all of the scholarships, valedictorians in all the years, in all the schools. They're going to be the top. So the research trying to determine why. So what they have done is they asked families. They looked at what are they doing. First they thought, of course, it's intelligence. But then they began to look at actions. And what they discovered was that the average Asian family or child, student, spends about an average of an hour and a half on homework every night.
Every night. Every night.
The average white family or child spends about an hour, 40 minutes to an hour. Hispanic children spend about 30 minutes. African American children spend an average of 20 minutes and they don't like it. They then began to survey parents and they asked the question of African American children, white children, Asian families. They asked these parents, what's the most important factor in determining educational achievement? White families and black families all said the same thing: intelligence. Asian families said hard work and effort. Now think about what that means. If the most important factor is intelligence, then you don't need to work. Because if you work and you're not intelligent, it won't help. And if you're intelligent, you don't need to work. Asian families said, no, 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 that's not it. It's not what you're born with, it's what you do with what you got. One thing, African Americans, we traditionally know how to work. There's no secret really in what we do at Imani. We spell success, W-O-R-K. That's how we spell success. We teach our children and we hold teachers accountable for education. We need in our communities to hold our teachers accountable. We need to set the standard. We don't need to allow it to be watered down. Teach up to our children. The funny thing about working with children that I love is that they don't know no better. If you tell them they're supposed to read, they think they're supposed to read and they learn it. Yeah. I'm so hurt. I got a child this year who was promoted to 4th grade. I said, wait a minute, let me look this record. When I tell you they can't read, I don't mean that they can't read a little bit. I mean they can't read T-H-I-S or H-I-L-L. That should be illegal. The school that did that to them should be held criminally accountable for ruining a child's life. Who are we to put a period on a child's life? Who are we to set their parameters so low and say that you will not go any farther? And what you don't know is okay. And I'm not going to try to teach you. But each of us has a responsibility to speak for our child. Just do it for yours. Do it for ours.
Wow. Dr. Sharpton, you're around the nation. You hear a lot, you see a lot. You talk to people all the time. What's different about what you're hearing tonight, and how is it impacting you, particularly like this final expression from Dr. Williams?
Well, I think, first of all, this has been a great night. Y'all should give the bishop another hand. And I said to him, and I say publicly, that he and I are going to talk about each one of these areas, how we engage this in a national conversation and get back to a lot of the panelists, to use my platform to try and do that. Because they need to be on a national platform talking about this. And I'm going to work with Bishop to do that. I think the difference that I felt tonight is I go to a lot of places, a lot of forums. I have a show on Sunday morning on MSNBC I'm going to do from Houston in the morning. And the difference is there's a difference between people that are experts and people that are really committed and involved in what they're doing. And you talk to people that can give you the data, but they really can't tell you what the real deal is. Right. So I said, and it sounded like I was joking, but I was serious. When he got finished, I was ready to go and lay in front of the bus to stop the next kid. I'm serious. Because you feel that he means what he's doing. These two here is the only thing stopping me from the bus because I'm ready to go bust up the sex trafficking thing. They feel that. The judge put his career on the line to do I mean, on and on and on. She lit me up. And I've known him a long time, but I never heard him talk like that from the NAACP and then in mine. There's a difference in when you talk to people that are committed. And they're the ones that need to be on the platform. In my career, and you've known it, in my journey, I've been to jail fighting civil rights, did 90 days one time, 30 days a few other times. So I lived this thing. I got a scar on my chest that I look at every morning. I won't remove where a guy stabbed me leading the march. And I went to jail. White guy stabbed me, tried to kill me for leading the march and visitors. I went to jail to visit him in his second year. He got 9 years for trying to kill me. And I went to forgive him. And he said that, I'll never forget that you came and did this for me. I said, no, I did it for me. Because I had to find out if I really believed what I preached. And that is what I felt tonight. They believed this, what they preached. James Brown, the entertainer, Bishop knew, was like a father to me. He took me when I was 17, 18 years old in civil rights. His son got killed was my age. And one thing I learned from James Brown, he said, Reverend, people can feel you before they can hear you. You can talk all you want. People can feel you quicker and more intently than they can hear you. And I felt the people you assembled tonight. They mean it, they feel it. And if we could get, there's the saying that if you are living in a house at the end of the road in the midst of the woods, if you catch on fire, the whole world will come and watch you burn. I want to see a way that we can put them on a stage where what they're burning with, people can see and it'll catch fire everywhere.
Great. Let me say this tonight. I am under deep conviction again because I have listened and met the benefit I have, which also is a burden, is I have known and have listened to and have sat with everybody in this room. I have processed these issues thoroughly. And so this is not just something we're doing for a little public notoriety. I have marched with Reverend Sharpton. I have sat with him for hours, and people say to me who don't really know him, you know, they think he's a soundbite. But I will tell you, the passion that Reverend Sharpton has for, first of all, for Christ, is a passion that translates to passion for people. You can't love Jesus for real and not love people. And he loves Jesus for real. And I so appreciate that. I wanted him to meet you. I wanted him to know you. I wanted him to know you. I wanted him to hear and know you. And I wanted you to know him. These pastors on the way out, I want you all to come back and touch his hand personally, want him to know you. I live with the burden, Reverend, of such an enormous, multifaceted challenge for our community. And the hardest thing to do now is to get people in a church that's about real ministry. And I've got the gifts, the skills. I could entertain if I know how to build that. My conscience and convictions would never allow it. But there's a price to be paid, Father, when we're trying to do this for the right reasons. But there are not enough of us to go around for any of us to be disconnected. The few of us who really care, you wouldn't be here these 3 hours if you didn't care. But I believe we have got to organize locally to where this is not an every now and then conversation.
Right.
There's an organized effort with structure, with teams, committees that are working on this, and this has to become what church is. It can't be a side thing for the church. It has to be the thing for the church. And Rodney Ellis, and Dean Douglas knows, Rodney doesn't go to church a lot. He rode his bicycle over here one day, and he happened to come on the right Sunday. And now Rodney is telling people, you know, that's my church. That's my pastor. Get him a membership card the next time he comes to, and give him some envelopes, be sure. But here's the point I'm making. I believe that we need to become a collective. And I want to leave with everybody giving us your information, because I want to send you a letter and ask you, will you commit to being a part? Do you know how many parents need to hear what she just said? Do you know how many teachers need to hear what she just said? So we need an entity, a way to continue to meet, to expose people to be a part of that. And I want anyone in here who has in your pocket a $20 bill to get it out. I'm not going to ask you for it yet, but I need, if you have anyone, there's a $20 bill. A $20 bill. And if you have a $20 bill, I need. Yes. Well, I'm not going to collect an offering yet. We're going to give before we leave, because I'm going to ask you to sow into something, because I want to bless Reverend Sharpton. But can I have that 20? Can I have this one? All right, and this one, and this one. All right, now listen, Dean. Now, I'm going to give you a 20 back. Does it matter which one I give you?
No.
Okay. Does it matter? Okay. I got yours. Okay. Do you mind? Okay. Did you give me one? Did you give me one, Reverend? I'm gonna collect it in a minute, but I need more than 20 from you in the offering. Who else gave me one that I didn't give you one back?
Yourself?
I know I had one. Okay. Now, none of you checked the serial number on those 20s to make sure I gave you yours back.
No.
It doesn't matter, because all those 20s spend the same.
Right.
But when you go to one of those schools where the 6% of the kids go to the white community school, or they go to the private schools, or they're out in the suburbs where they got university kind of campuses. You get a high school diploma in the 12th grade. The state of Texas has one seal that goes on every diploma. So the kids at Booker T. Washington and Yates and Cashmere, their certificate looks the same seal, but they don't spend the same. So our kids spend the same amount of time in school, graduate with a diploma, but it doesn't have the same value. So when our kids apply to college, it doesn't mean the same. Their diploma doesn't spend the same. It's same amount of time, same seal on the certificate. Doesn't mean the same. When they apply for a job, it doesn't mean the same. Who's the loudest people in a high school graduation? Our black parents and Hispanic parents are, yeah! My baby finished. Not knowing that the diploma they have won't spend the same. So we're setting children up to fail, and they don't know it. So I'm closing by saying, I'm asking us, beyond tonight, I want to have your information because I want to come back to organize. We need teams working on trafficking, teams working on immigration, because we do need to go stop the buses. Reverend Sharpton will lay in front of that bus. I promise you, literally. He will lay in front of that bus, and I will be laying next to him. You understand? He will fight this cause on trafficking. We do need a committee on education. How do we begin now to reorientate parents to raise kids to work hard, to study? Because those stats also say we watch 10 hours more of television per week. So we do need teams working with the realtors on housing. Or you call it a realtor?
Realtist.
How many of you ever heard of a realtist? No, not realtor, realtist. Tell them why you're a realtist.
When we were formed in 1947, we could not carry the brand Realtor. They owned it, and they did not want blacks or minorities to have a part in that. Therefore, we became real estate specialists, hence Realtist, and that is our logo. So when you see an African American real estate professional, remember that they are Realtist.
Wow. Now, when were you finally able to become a realtor?
In the city of Houston. It did not happen until 1972 before we could carry the Realtor designation. And many minorities do carry the Realtor designation because they still sit in power and control many of the tools that we need to operate in our profession. Yet we have the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, the Asian Association, and then NARAB, which is the African American Association. The African American is the only one that has a different designation, and it's Realtist.
This is 2018. I want the pastors to introduce themselves so you know who's here, and pastors then we're going to be escorted out because I want you to meet Reverend Sharp.
I'm Father Rafael Villarreal, Santa Cruz Mission, which is right here across the freeway on 45. Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you, Father. Thank you so much. Give him a hand.
I am Pastor Trevi Washington, Mount Hermon Missionary Baptist Church in the inner city in Frenchtown. Thank you, Bishop.
They don't know what Frenchtown is. Kathy knows. Yeah.
John Ogletree, First Metropolitan Church in Northwest Houston.
My name is Jamil Johnson. I pastor the Word Church. We are having service now in Decaney High School, and we service the Greensport and Spring area.
E.A. Deckard, Greenhouse International Church, and co-founder of the No More Bloodshed Movement. But guys, one more thing. I'm down with all of this, but the underlying of all of this is all of this produces crime and violence. So can we please add crime and violence to this panel? Because if we're uneducated and we live in apartments and we're being prostituted, we're going to end up being violent. So let's add this to the table, please.
Absolutely, it should have been the night. You do know that. All right. So let me thank these pastors. Let's give them a big hand. Thank them, because when pastors show up not to talk, you know they really care. And we appreciate that to the highest. Reverend Sharpton, any final remarks? Are you good?
I'm good.
All right. I want to thank those who viewed by streaming. Thank you so very much. Give our streaming audience a hand. We so appreciate you watching tonight. Stay tuned. There'll be more Empower Talk sessions to come, and we will absolutely let you know ahead of time, because we're here to inform you, because the informed mind is an armed mind, and an armed mind is an empowered mind. Until next time, keep believing it's going to get better. Give them a hand, won't you? Let's stand together. Oh yes, yes. Thank you, Catherine. Now I want to ask you, because I'm going to do this. If you were really blessed tonight,
that they were held for, quote, being poor, as they could not afford to pay their bail. Rosenthal's ruling safeguards that no person in jail for a low-level offense and unable to pay their bail will be stuck in jail. Tonight, to help us better understand the impact of this ruling and other issues at the County Commissioner's Court, we are pleased to welcome Harris County Precinct 1 Commissioner Rodney Ellis, and leading our discussion are hosts David Jones and Gary Polland.
And let's let Commissioner Ellis know how this all started with Judge Rosenthal. Judge Rosenthal was not a judge. It was the end of Bush 41's term. And he brought her to me because he knew that I knew Joe Biden. And he said, we need to push this one through. I want you to meet her and see if you can help get her through Biden. I met her. I went full board.
Visit to McAllen, Texas. U.S. mayors gathered at a holding facility for immigrant children at the Texas-Mexico border. They accused President Trump of making a humanitarian crisis of his own creation. The mayors from 20 cities across the country are calling for the immediate reunification of immigrant children with their families. Joining me now is Rachel Bovard, Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
President Trump signed the executive orders keeping families together, but it's unclear what happens to those 2,000 children who have been separated. About 239, I think, went to New York City. Mayor de Blasio didn't know about it. American Airlines is saying, and other airlines are saying, we don't want to take these kids. So what next? What happens next in this crisis?
Well, we know for the kids that are coming across the border now with their families, everyone will be detained together. But for those existing children that you're talking about, the agencies are working out how to get around the existing restrictions. So the governing law in all of this is something called the Florida.
That you have to talk about, but you don't want to because you don't want to think that that happens.
starving for peace, but feeding no more. I can't understand what this blood is for. They feed us the headlines, then comes the news.
I was born in 1941, and I saw the craziness around me then. It's the same craziness I see around me now.
Carry me home when the light in my eyes does fade.
In my world, not too much has changed.
People didn't dismantle Brown versus the Board of Education. People moved their children. People voted with their feet.
I've spent enough time in the hallways and classrooms of segregated schools to see the way that it just crushes the opportunities of these kids. They know that there are other schools with white kids. They know that those schools tend to have better things than they have.
I know kids in my class that got arrested that summer before they even got to high school, and they never had that teacher that really cared. So you have underqualified teachers plus underserved schools, and you expect the kids to do well. And usually the people that have to face this issue are young, Black, or Latino or minority kids.
The idea that we can create equitable schools in a segregated society is a myth. Show me where it's happening. It's not happening anywhere. We're one of the few countries in the world that systematically and deliberately spends less money to educate poor children than affluent children.
But you can still walk into a high school in Los Angeles, regardless of the color of your skin. But I will tell you, you cannot walk into AP courses and you cannot have the best equipped school. So while the front door is open, the classroom door still remains a real impactful problem.
I want to have children one day, and I want my children to go to a school that's racially diverse, that's socioeconomically diverse, that's categorically high achieving. And I'm looking around Arkansas and I'm not seeing a good example. So guess what that means? I better.
Is this the sound you want? I'm Paris Ely with the Icon Chronicles, and we're here tonight with Reverend, with the Bishop, with Father, with Father Rafael Villarreal, and he's been here with us tonight at the Community of Faith Church. Community of Faith Church. Father, as we get ourselves together technically here, we're delighted to have you here tonight. There were a lot of issues on the table tonight in the conversation with between Reverend Sharpton and Bishop Dixon. What resonated with you particularly?
Yes, well, first of all, of course, it was such an honor to be able to be gathered here with all of you. Bishop Dixon is just a faithful and courageous man here in our community. And of course, Reverend Al Sharpton, I mean, just an icon. And to hear them articulate these issues for us and put them in a context that gives us this vision of uniting to continue fighting for these things that are dividing our communities. That really resonated with me. I want to tell you something that maybe a lot of African Americans don't know. We in the Latino community, the undocumented community, really do consider the African American community our elder brothers in this struggle that we are just now learning how to fight. So the ways in which people collectively engage, unite, get strengthened by their ties are things that we're just learning, because the predominant emotion in our community is fear.
What did you think about the call, going to one of the issues that we touched upon tonight, immigration? What did you think about the call for in immigration and sex trafficking, for the need for our communities to work across cultural and local boundaries?
Well, I can tell you, having served on the Interfaith Houston sex trafficking task force, that the sex traffickers don't discriminate on what culture they are preying upon. They don't care if you are of one race or another. And we who are the victims of this, because when you either know or love someone who has been involved in this, you too become hurt by it. We are the ones now who, uniting, can address this and make it like the opioid. The opioid epidemic. We can make this something in the public arena that has the same importance and gets allotted the same resources like that the opioid crisis did.
Father Rafael Villarreal, I want to thank you so much for joining us here tonight for this town hall, for this forum, and this open discussion, and giving us your takeaways and your views.
Thank you, Paris. It was my pleasure. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jamal. Oh. Excuse me.
Everybody's opted in. Oh, that's
Thank you so much. Okay. Jamal, how are you? It's good to see you again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Great to be seen.
Okay. Let's know, what is your church again? Identify yourself for the...
Yes, sir. My name is Jamil Johnson. I pastor the Word Church here in the city of Houston, Texas.
Now, Jamil, quite an interesting conversation tonight, an engaging conversation tonight. We spoke on several areas where the community needs to come together. We highlighted education, immigration. We talked about bail reform. We heard from Commissioner Rodney Ellis. What resonated with you?
Wow. I'm kind of like Reverend Al. After I heard so much, I didn't know which area to go into. But I think the one that stuck out with me is education. Being the son of a former educator, my mother taught in North Forest ISD for over 40 years. And education has always been huge in our family, from my sister, my older sister, my brother, and myself. Education was really pushed at the forefront. But I can't necessarily say that everyone was challenged the way we were.
Right.
Once again, growing up in the house with an educator, education was at the forefront. Before you did anything else, school came first. But I believe we have to get back to that place, or get to a place where education becomes important, because I believe that once we're educated, and not just knowledgeable of what's in the books, but knowledgeable of what's inside of you and knowledgeable of who you are, I think then we are able to see ourselves making forward strides in all of the other areas. So I believe education is at the top tier.
Jamil, I want to thank you so much, and thank you for your thoughts on this. We're going to be asking some of the other ministers here the same, and thank you so much for taking this time to talk with us. Okay, all right. Paris Ely with the Icon Chronicles. We're here live after the forum tonight, in the wake of the forum at the Community of Faith Church, where Bishop James Dixon presides, and the town hall tonight was on issues confronting our community. Immigration. We've got Keisha here with us tonight. Keisha, introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, my name is Keisha Powell-Barley. My background is clinical mental health counseling, and I came to support the bishop and the whole entire panel.
I've been asking this of the guests. There are several areas. We talked about bail reform. We talked about no money bail. We talked about immigration. We talked about education for our children. We talked about, most importantly perhaps to some, capitalism, to economic well-being. Which one of those areas did you find most interesting for you?
I found the bail reform most interesting. Because of the simple fact that if a person can be murdered, a person can murder somebody and their bail is set at $1 million and they're able to pay $100,000 versus someone who goes to a shopping center and steals something, their bail is set at $5,000 and they can't afford to pay $500 to get out of jail, but the person who murdered someone gets out of jail, and then the person who shoplifted has to stay in there. And I found that very, it did something to my spirit, for the simple fact that, again, it all boils down to, my opinion, mental health and poverty, because poverty is the #1 cause of mental health in African American communities. And so with that being said, the poverty mind is versus the economic, how can I say it, the economic to take care of their families and to be able to job support and all that kind of stuff. You can't even get
Without
out.
the economic literacy, it spawns other problems.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, I thought it was a terrific panel. What do you think will come out of this? Within the church, within other organizations in this inter-organizational effort.
When I was sitting there prophetically seeing, I actually saw a tour for this entire panel to go around speaking to different churches and on different platforms to actually educate the communities, because we all need educating.
Okay, I want to thank you so much, Keisha, for joining us.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Very good. Very good. Oh, okay. All right. Hey, Caleb.
Yes, sir.
How are you? How you doing? Good. So you come up tonight, and Caleb, where are you in school?
I attend Roberson Middle School by Westfield High School.
Okay. And what did you think about? How old are you first of all?
I'm 11 years old.
You're 11 years old. All right. And what was your favorite part of the panel tonight? What caught your attention? What are you taking away from this?
Definitely everything that Reverend Sharpton said. My dad, he was telling me different things. He was trying to break it down for me, and I was really understanding it. Just for me to be in his presence was very empowering.
And did you come with someone?
Yes, my father.
Oh, your father brought you here. So you thought you'd hang out with Dad tonight and
yes, sir.
Get a new kind of education. So how's school for you?
Good.
What do you think about their comments on school?
It's really good. I just got my first progress report, all A's, so I'm doing well.
Very good, very good. Well, you take the advice of the panelists here tonight, and you continue to do well in school. Yes, thank you for stopping by. All right, I'm Paris Ely, everybody.
Close it out.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's the Icon Chronicles. I'm Paris Ely. Thank you for joining us here at the Community of Faith.